The October 2nd, 2018 Select Board meeting to order. There's no changes to the agenda announcements, Libby.
Thank you. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. We have a number of announcements tonight. There is a Zoning Board of Appeals public hearing regarding the Surfside Crossing 40B application tomorrow, Wednesday, October 3rd at 4:30 at the Nantucket High School Auditorium. This is a second hearing from the August, I believe it was, hearing. We have a special town meeting, actually two, coming up Wednesday, October 10th, next Wednesday, October 10th, starting at 6 p.m. at the high school auditorium. As a result, there will be no select board meeting that Wednesday. The 2019 annual town meeting warrant is open for citizen article submittals between October 4th and November 19th. This will be advertised in the paper this week. Town council will be available for consultations with citizens on Wednesday, October 17th from 2 to 4, and Thursday, October 18th, 9 to 11 at the Town Building Conference Room. We encourage people to take advantage of this if they are considering citizen warrant articles. And I wanted to mention, back to the special town meeting, we have some big boards that we've developed. Thank you, Florencia, our amazing public outreach coordinator, in the back of the room here. Those are going to be going around to different locations in the next few days, including at Stop and Shop next Tuesday, the 9th, from 5 to 7, and town officials will be with the big boards, and anybody who has questions is welcome to and encouraged to come in and talk to us. Also, we put out an e-newsletter today, mostly about the special town meeting, about a few other things as well, and it contains the voter's guide to the warrant articles. This is a guide that is meant to explain the articles in sort of plain language. The warrant itself is in the mail, and voters, if you have not received it yet, you should be receiving it any time now for the special town meetings.
And the voter's guide's on the website, easy to find.
The voter's guide is also on the website. It will be available at town meeting, and we'll probably get it out on social media ahead of time as well.
I used it for talking to the town association today. They found it very helpful. Just reading through really quick.
Yep.
They understood it.
Excellent.
So well done.
Great, thank you. The next item was going to be the police chief status update regarding the African Meeting House graffiti incident. The chief is out sick, so Detective Klinger is here, and he is going to give you the update.
Good evening. My name is Tom Klinger. I'm a detective sergeant in charge of investigations for the police department. So at this point, currently, obviously, this is still an active and ongoing investigation. We have exhausted all of our leads at this point. We've interviewed numerous people. We've looked into hearsay information. We've looked into allegations of individuals that seem to be focused on social media, and basically, those types of leads sort of hinder our investigation because there is no background and there is no real evidentiary matter as it relates to those. So sometimes that actually hurts an investigation. But at this point, we are hoping that someone will come forward with leads or information that could help us further this investigation. The area, obviously we're all familiar with the area this happened. The neighborhood has been canvassed. We've spoken to neighbors, looked at video, hours of videos from different locations, and again, we have exhausted all of our leads. So at this point, we're hoping someone will come forward from the community because someone knows something and actually get involved and help us solve this.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Could you
Sure.
guys, is it legal to geofence? Can you geofence that area? Basically pull up what phone, can you pull up what phones were in that area between those times? Everything's captured now.
Everything, you need a search warrant to look at anything from anyone, specifically even a cell phone, because it's just like the computer you're sitting in front of now. So if you don't have probable cause, you can't do anything.
Right, so an activity like this on that property at that hour, you're not allowed to look at it?
No, because, we have no, we would have, that's something that you would need a search warrant for, and that search warrant would come from a court. In order to obtain that search warrant, you need probable cause. So you need clear and articulable facts that state why you want to gather that information. There's no more witch hunting as it relates to anything electronic.
Okay. I'm just I'm a little surprised in a case like this. The reason I'm asking is I know businesses can do it. We're not allowed to get the names, but I know businesses have put a geofence up, and the data project has done it. We don't get the names, but they get a conglomeration of data, and it can tell exactly where certain phones went at what times and how often and when they went to the Stop and Shop and when they went home. And I would think under something like this it may be a federal crime that you could look at, but I could be wrong. You could look at who was there anyone on that property between 10 o'clock and 2 in the morning that committed this crime, but you can't do that.
No, I mean, you can check with town council. It's a search warrant process, and unfortunately, unless we have certain clear, articulable facts, that would be construed as a witch hunt. So it's like you going to the Stop and Shop, and we just want to see who's at the Stop and Shop at a certain time because somebody broke into a car. It's the same thing.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Detective Leader. Thanks.
And thank you for having that on the agenda. It was great to have that update.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any public comment here tonight that's not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none. There's no new business that I'm aware of. Get a motion for approval of the minutes and payroll warrants and treasury warrants.
So,
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Pending contracts. Libby, is there anything?
I just wanted to point out that there's only two, and one's a grant. The other is an amendment to a current contract, which is our independent traffic assessor for the Surfside Crossing project, and this relates to the recently submitted modification to the application, and the services would examine if there is any additional analysis to be done based on the potential reduction in capacity. So they're working on that. The other two independent reviewers, I'll probably mention this in my upcoming report about the independent reviews, have indicated that there would be no change in their findings as a result.
Thank you.
Make a motion to approve the pending contracts.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. That motion passes. All right, consent items. We have gift acceptance for the Natural Resource Department, Planning and Land Use Services, and Nantucket Girl Scout Troop 66120.
Motion to accept with letters of thank you.
Second.
My daughter's in Cruise Troop
Second.
66120, so maybe I shouldn't vote.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Don's abstaining. Is he abstaining? Okay.
I'll accuse.
I can't believe you didn't support the Girl Scouts, Dawn.
It's my daughter's troop, so am I supposed to? Probably not in that case. But.
Well, I think
No,
all
I'm
the gifts are
kidding.
great, but what the Girl Scouts have done there, you used to be able to, you'd walk by and you didn't know that the memorial was there. They've done a great job. So thank you to the Girl Scouts. On to Citizen Department request. We have 1 and 2 are similar, 2 different properties. Nantucket Land Council. First one, request for approval of amendment of conservation restriction to be held by Nantucket Land Council. Portions of land located at 12 and 14 North Liberty Street. Cormac's just going to open with a brief summary, I think.
Cormac Collier, on behalf of the board of the Nantucket Land Council, I'm the executive director. Before you, we have 2 amendments, requests to our conservation restrictions, one on 12 North Liberty Street, and then the other on a property that's abuts Westchester, Nantucket Road, and Crooked Lane. I believe you have a lot of the documentation in your packet, and you also have 2 memos from town council explaining their review of the requests. More than happy to go into the request if you'd like to have any further questions.
Any questions from the board?
No.
Right. If you have the motions in front of you, I don't know exactly how you have to word it.
I'll make a motion to approve the amended conservation restriction for 12 and 14 North Liberty Street and find that it is in the public interest pursuant to MGL Chapter 184S32.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes unanimously. Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the amended conservation restriction for 1 Westchester Street extension and find that it is in the public interest pursuant to MGL Chapter 184, Section 32.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously.
Great. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Cormac.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work. All right, number 3, we have property owners of Toshma Lane, request for acceptance of petition for improvements to Toshma Lane pursuant to Chapter 127, Article 8, the Code of Town of Nantucket.
Good evening, Matthew Rubin, on behalf of the property owners of Tashma Lane. Just want to make sure that everyone has the information provided in the packet regarding the betterment proposal, betterment petition in front of you. Reasons for the betterment petition are due to the dangerous conditions on Tashma Lane from years of drainage issues related to the initial subdivision itself, plus additional water that has come onto the street along with sediment from Surfside Road, which was recently corrected in the spring of 2018. So I want to thank the town and for their support on doing that, and also want to thank the entire town manager's office, including Ms. Gibson and Ms. Mooney, as well as the DPW director and David Grave from the sewer department in their help in preparing this petition, vetting it, and allowing us to bring it in front of you.
Any questions, Libby? Do you want to?
I was just going to add to that. There's a lot of information in your packet, and it looks like a lot of information, and it is, but it's actually a fairly straightforward request. Abutters along a private roadway, if they want the town to fix their roadway, may request it through a petition process specifically outlined in the town code. Otherwise, the town does not take up repairs to private roads. Typically, once the abutters find out what is required to make the petition, it's not a totally simple matter, as Mr. Rubin knows. Not only is the petition, depending on the number of homeowners, sometimes difficult to come up with, it often ends up that the town doing the work is going to be more expensive and more time consuming than if the people just got together and hired somebody to do the work on their own because of procurement and the town's process. It's just lengthy and time consuming. However, sometimes people make it through that gauntlet of effort, and Mr. Rubin persevered and has come up with everything is correct, and we did consult with him a number of times. It's been reviewed by town council. So the bottom line here is that if the board accepts the petition, then the work would be paid for by the town up front and bettered to the abutters through their tax bills over a period of time. And that the betterment assessment will come back to you at a later time. This sort of kicks off the process. And I don't think town administration has any objections to the petition. It does make some logistical sense with the sewer contractor being in the area, and they were going to be doing the repaving on that road anyway. So it's not too massive of a project for them to do this additional drainage and curbing work while they're going to get at the paving as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and to Ms. Gibson's point, what we did not want to have happen is the street be repaved without the drainage work being done, and have the town spend good money and chase a bad problem, and be in the same situation a few years from now. Seemed like a waste of funds. So generously, I think the property owners have dealt with the significant potholes and so on, and agreed to hold off on the paving until the drainage work was done, so that we can fix it the right way once and for all. So appreciate everyone's time and effort on that front.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board?
I have a comment. I'm a fan of this process. I'm a fan of betterments, especially in the cases of a case of a subdivision that's sort of not up to code. I think you guys, this is great that you're doing it. I think it's great you're doing it at this time for the town's benefit, but also for your own benefit, because we've got sort of a good deal with the guys doing the work now, and they're doing a lot of work here. Right. So I think it's going to work out for both sides. But I want to remind the board that it doesn't, and this is this is fair for the other taxpayers, that when they purchase the homes with, a certain level of road, et cetera, that was reflected in the home they purchased. This is not going to impact other taxpayers, and it leaves us, sort of more ammunition to fix other things that need to be fixed. And so for that reason, I think it's another reason I think it's great. This petition is brought by the neighborhood, but as a board, in certain circumstances, we should be considering betterments in these situations. And we can do it without this whole process, without making them gather all the signatures, et cetera. And I think it's a lot of times, it's a fiscally prudent way to take care of the taxpayers who have a lot of other things to spend money on. So I applaud you for, sort of setting a good example and, and doing something at the right time, the right way. And I thank you.
Thank you, Selectman. Appreciate it.
Just for discussion, I'll make a motion that we approve the request from the property owners of Tashima Lane for drainage improvements to Tashima Lane pursuant to Chapter 127, Article 8 of the Code of the Town of Nantucket.
Second.
Any other discussion? Take a vote.
The determination.
There, on page 2 of the cover sheet, under the recommendation, it does say it has 2 conditions. Should that be applied to the motion?
So
Yes.
I will amend the motion to reflect those conditions.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
your
for
time.
your work.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, town manager's report.
Thank you. And thank you to Mr. Rubin. He really did spend a tremendous amount of time on this. Okay, the status of the Surfside Crossing 40B independent reviews. There's a little bit to report following your meeting from last week. It's in your packet. As you know, the board authorized 3 independent reviews for this project: traffic, hydrogeology, and environmental. As of the end of last week, the traffic report was received, and we have the amendment on the pending contracts tonight, which you just approved. That consultant will be at the ZBA hearing tomorrow. The hydrogeology report is in, and as I mentioned earlier, the consultant indicated that his findings would inconsequentially change as a result of the modified proposal. He will also be at the meeting tomorrow. I'm just noticing I have a typo there. That word consultant, and then there's nothing after it. The environmental report has been received, and by the way, these reports are all online. And same thing with that consultant, unlikely to change any of the findings as a result of the modified proposal, and that consultant will also be available to us as this process proceeds with regard to conditions and mitigation and things like that with natural heritage. The departments were all requested to review the modified proposal and see if any of their findings changed. Most of them did not change, although a couple of additional conditions came up, and I only just got those in the last couple of days. So one of the next steps is, and then some of the other conditions were recommended are listed here in the packet. The plan with town council is to put together a supplemental comment letter from the board, which will review with you probably at your October 17th meeting, that will contain conditions and any other findings at that time. So if you all know of anything that you want to try to work in, we could get that reviewed and get it in the draft letter for that meeting. And I think that's it. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
No.
Thank you, Libby.
Oh, yeah, it's still me. The finance team and town admin have prepared an overview of the fiscal 2020 general fund budget projections. It's around this time of year where we generally start getting you to be thinking about the next upcoming year's budget. The finance director is going to take us through. I think he has a little bit of an introduction to make of a new staff member.
Thank you very much. So before we get into what I'm sure everybody is waiting for tonight, we're really happy and excited in the finance department to have hired Alexandria Penta, who's here with us tonight. Alexandria is taking over the finance and budget position, which Julia Lindner recently vacated, and she comes to us some really great experience, having worked in the Secretary of Energy's office in the Commonwealth doing budgets and forecasting. So we're really excited to have her here, jumping in at probably the most fun and busiest time of the year. It's a great way to get acclimated very quickly. So as the town manager mentioned, we're here to kind of start the preliminary budget process, kind of giving an overview where we think revenue may end up to start the year, and a very preliminary, and as I always say, please don't get married to any of the numbers in these sheets, because they will change very, very many times over the next 3 or 4 months. So we typically always start with Proposition 2.5, which is the largest generator of revenue for the general fund. Approximately 88% of all general fund revenue comes from real and personal property taxes. In conjunction with DOR, every year we determine what the levy limit is to begin the process to start figuring out where our revenue is going to be. We're allowed under the statute to raise the amount raised in real and personal property taxes 2.5%, which is why this is affectionately known as Proposition 2.5, through new growth and any overrides that we've added, either permanent overrides or any temporary exclusions, be it debt exclusions. As you may remember, this past year we did some capital exclusions, which would be one-time raises to the tax rate for capital. So starting with what we typically have to do is start with where we think fiscal 19 the levy limit will be. On the left-hand column, I do have to tell you that fiscal 19's actual levy limit to start calculating for fiscal 20 is still not set, because we're in the process of getting the values set by DOR and the new growth certified for fiscal 19. But we are projecting that the levy limit starting point for fiscal 20 will be $74,428,000. When we add 2.5% as allowed by statute, that's another $1.8 million. We are projecting about $750,000 in new growth. As most of you are aware, we generally start a little bit on the lower side, being conservative, consistent with our forecast. And as the year goes on, we have made adjustments to that after discussions with the assessor. So the allowable levy limit that we could raise is $77,039,000. What we add to that then is any debt exclusions. We're projecting $8.7 million in debt exclusions this year. One of the reasons for the increase is the Clean Water Trust borrowed $14.9 million on behalf of the town permanently for the Nantucket Harbor Schimmel project, and we now have a repayment schedule starting in July that we will have to begin paying, so we now have to account for that in here as well. So the maximum that we can raise in real and personal property taxes, we're estimating for fiscal 20 to be $85,796,000. The next slide on page 5 is essentially just showing what we've actually received or taken in from 2014 to 2018 to just give you a brief glimpse of the growth over the last 5 years. I know that this is a sheet everybody is always really excited to see, is where we think expenditures are going to be. Fiscal 20, we have taken into account in the general fund, both town and school, all impacts of all approved collective bargaining agreements. We've also added in the transfer to the community school to give us projected salaries. This includes no new positions on either side of $45.1 million. Operating expenses, we have added about just over 2% to both school and town projections on where we'll be. We're still kind of going through that because we do back out any one-time expense increase requests. I do believe most of them have been taken out, but we're still continuing to review that. Health insurance, we're budgeting about 8% increase. We're certainly hoping that trending is actually still favorable to us and may be a little bit lower, but that's kind of where our insurance consultant's seeing that. So medical insurance projected to be $13.1 million next year. General insurances, given some of the recent catastrophic events being floods and hurricanes, our insurance consultants indicating that we probably will start to feel some of the effects of that through our property insurances, so they've suggested we increase that by about 10%. we'll continue to work through the years. We always do to hold the line to the extent possible. Debt service in here is up, as I did mention that there is additional money for the SRF loans from the Clean Water Trust for Nantucket Harbor Shimo. We also have to begin paying back the part of the money that we had borrowed for the design of our island home. I think it was in 2013 or 14 or 15. Because of the timing and where we're at, we actually have to start making pay downs on that, and that's about another $172,000. Within that, there's also money for the solid waste for the landfill that was budgeted to come out of the general fund in there too. That's why it's at 9.1 here. And not all of that was excluded, which is where the primary difference is between slide 1. Other articles is down about just under $300,000. We do have a slide, and I'll take you through that. The majority of that is, which is one of the open points, is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We have projected the general fund subsidies. We have held we've held our island home static and have made provisions for the increases within the others as well to the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. We're projecting statutory expenses being cherry sheet offsets to remain at $495,000, but that will be adjusted throughout the year as we get more clarity on what the budget for the governor's budget is going to do. So all told, preliminary expenses are $99,242,000 with $99,980,000 of revenue, which leaves us excess levy capacity starting today at $737,000 to fund any new initiatives or budgetary increase requests. As I mentioned, what the other articles is made up of is projection for any unpaid bills, county assessment, the Health and Human Services article, reserve fund, other post-employment benefits, and whether or not we're going to add anything to capital stabilization, and the minimum capital requirement as by the town code, which is 1% of prior year real and personal property tax collections, as well as 1% of all local estimated receipts. So that projects to be $911,000. Just as we have typically done, kind of just where our island home subsidy is. As you can see, in 18 and 19, it remained flat, and we are projecting that same number for fiscal 20.
I had a question on that. On the CPE payment, as you know, Taunton's nursing home is closed or
Yes.
is closing. So our political leverage to maintain that may be diminished, especially given the economic condition of that community compared to Nantucket. Are you confident that it's, from a budgetary standpoint, that we should maintain that? And have we gotten any read from the state about the continuation of that program?
Well, in some of the discussions that we've had, as we go through many of the internal discussions about Ireland Home, there has been indications that people are not entirely sure that they don't feel that it's actually going to go away. They think it is something that will continue, partially because it's a very relatively small portion of the entire Commonwealth's budget, so it's not something that's going to be highlighted very much. We are running models in the event that it does go away. One thing that we do based on our discussions with DOR is that we never budget for that in the operating budget whatsoever. So it's not the CPE payment, which is the third line there, is not ever built into our operating budget, and DOR does not let us do that for that very specific reason. Okay? So, as we know, we're starting here in October. There's still many things that are left to be determined and decided and vetted as we go through. Free cash, I will tell you that DOR was here on Friday. The free cash and retained earnings certifications have been sent to our local rep supervisor for certification. We've put some pressure on them just because we have a special town meeting over, even though we're not planning on allocating it. We still have told them that, and we are hoping that it's supposed to be done and announced by Friday of this week. We should have it. The first quarter of fiscal 19 has just ended, so that's always one of the first quarters that we look at in determining where we think local estimated receipts for fiscal 20 can go. And we're wrapping up the close of the first 3 months, so that's something we're reviewing and inputting. Health insurance and retirement assessments obviously are very much in flux. Health insurance probably more than retirement, but we are on the phone constantly with our health insurance advisor looking for ways to reduce that overall increase. Local aid, as when we talk, we usually budget it consistent with what was approved in the prior fiscal year budget, which is what we're doing this year. The number of what both the governor's office, the Senate, and the House agree on doesn't usually come out until sometime in December, January, as they get a little bit more clarity on where receipts are in the local or in the state government, excuse me. As soon as we have that idea, we can potentially increase that, but we've usually held it where it was until we have more clear data on that. Year-round NRTA we really put on here because, as we've said, the actual impact of year-round service, which is beginning this year, won't be really felt until fiscal 21, but it's really something that we should be paying attention to, in fiscal 20, so we have an idea of what that impact is going to be. As noted in other articles, one of the items to be determined is what the transfer to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund may be during this year. And probably one of everybody's favorite that we continue to put on here is any discussion about override for the subsidy to our island home, if we think it's the time to do it or whether we want to continue to push it out until we have more clarity. So some of the budgetary priorities that we're still working through is obviously the strategic plan that the select board has recently adopted, housing, transportation, environmental priorities, and infrastructure that we're going through CAPCOM process right now, as well as the impact of the staffing assessment that, as everyone knows, is currently being done. None of that has been programmed into the preliminary effects or impacts on the budget. And we do have some potential budgetary impacts from recently enacted legislative changes and/or pending legislative changes. Recently acted is some changes to the OSHA law that do require the towns to implement some additional strategies and things of that nature. Marijuana legislation, which I know that you've all been working very hard on. One of the other changes that we are still trying to ascertain the impact to is there was a recently changed law to Section 111F, which is the essentially workers' comp for emergency personnel. There's a change in the clause in terms of determination and impact of firefighters unfortunately coming down with cancer. It potentially shifts all of the responsibility to Section 111F away from health insurance, and we are trying very quickly to ascertain what that impact may be on our budget, because it will potentially have a cost shift there. And there was recently legislation enacted that went into effect, I believe, in July of 2018, the Equal Pay Act. And I know that HR is reviewing the legislation and any requirements that we have under that legislation. One of the biggest pending legislations out there is the expansion of the room occupancy tax to short-term rentals. I think the governor has sent that back to the respective branches with modifications. Is that right? And we're waiting for what those are going to be, or whether they'll approve or what they'll do.
Just have a question on the marijuana. I know you can't, but we've seen some pro formas on the potential tax revenues from those, and I know you can't budget for those. Do we need a full year for DOR? Because I don't know when they're going to be able to open
think
and
that,
start collecting.
I think generally DOR is receptive to potential changes in revenue on a less than full year basis if we have a valid basis and benchmark for why we're doing it. And typically that happens when you're trying to increase revenues by more than 20%. They need to have they want to see the documentation on how you're getting there. So I do believe that we could provide the benchmark, but I also believe that they may want at least a little bit of time with the process in place to understand, to give us the ability to create that reliable data.
Thank you.
John, did you?
I had a question about the NRTA.
Sure.
Is there any way for us to set aside funding for that? Is there any mechanism where we could?
Well, if you were to see, the thing about the NRTA is that it's a cherry sheet offset, so it automatically is taken when state aid is sent to us. Our cherry sheet offsets are automatically taken out of the money that the state wires to us on a monthly basis. So it could be set aside as a coverage, but it couldn't be used to directly pay for that increase because that increase will automatically be paid through the reduction in state aid.
When you say impact of staffing assessment, is there any, and I understand that's going to do some wage and benefit, I mean, I've asked and that's going to be included. Is there any talk of adopting compact community best practices in that realm?
We actually, we're very hurriedly completing one for another grant that's been filed, which we do support, and one of the opportunities, a transition plan for ADA through compact communities, which we are applying for, and we are going to be applying for an HR best practices community compact at the same time. It's something that the town manager and I have talked about, and we've written a scope to be able to send with that.
Yeah, and that makes me very happy because I think it's such a good job in the finance department. We have other realms that I think we need to do it at. I mean, when I look at this, things are really good now, and we're getting 5%, compound growth, et cetera. It doesn't go up forever, and I think we have to figure out how do we make sure we're ready for that. So I'm glad to hear.
And just for everybody's information, we did just add an appendix to here just to show you what actual new growth has been over the last 6 years. If you average it out, it's a little over $1 million over that 6-year period.
And my theory on new growth is new growth should go to new stuff. It should be there for new roads and new buildings and new hires, and we should be using it for that and not using it for existing, because when you start to use it for existing, you get yourself in trouble. Because when it goes away, then the existing that you're spending it on has to go away, and it's hard to get rid of people in buildings. So
it can be difficult, yes.
It can, and we had that last go round. So I try to keep it simplified, and I'm pretty simple. I look at it that way.
But that's certainly something to talk about when we talk about budget assumptions, just, board budget assumptions. I'd even go one further because, once you start paying for it and hire people, you can't just, if the growth goes away, you still have to pay them, those two people too. So you might think about even some one-time things. So I know that's a big stretch, but that's one other way to look at it.
So just as far as next steps go, you may have seen that last week, thank you, Ally, the budget instructions went out to all of the departments. We're in the process now of scheduling our individual reviews with every department, and we would expect to provide the board with our budget recommendation by early to mid-December. It may have to get pushed out a little bit because of time spent on the special town meeting and the 40B and some other things that we don't normally spend time on.
Now, the next 2 months, do you look at all the EIRs going through and say yes, no,
All
next
of
year,
that.
all that? Yeah. That's all decided by December.
Yep.
All that.
Can I ask Rita a question? When do you think the Affordable Housing Trust Fund's strategic plan will be done? I just think that we'll need to sort of review that to think about what we'll do for funding.
Absolutely. The strategic plan should be sent out to us in the next week or so, and then our plan is to review it November 5th at that meeting. And then that's the point where we will, I think, have an idea of exactly what kind of funding we'll be looking for this year. And we were trying to keep in mind.
So you'll put together an ask.
Exactly. Yeah. And we were trying to keep in mind the timeline for town meeting as well.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian and Ally. Okay, the monthly town management activity report. As you know, I've been trying to sort of reformat this a little bit so that it's a bit more interactive if the board has questions or a bit of discussion about any of the items. I will try not to spend a lot of time on each one of these individually, but Surfside Crossing deserves some time here because that has taken quite a bit of staff time to work on with the independent reviews, the letter of concern that we sent to the Division of Fish and Wildlife last week. We're going to be working on the supplemental comment letter to the ZBA and then attendance at the hearing tomorrow. In concurrently with that, the October 10th special town meetings have been being worked on with the preparation of warrants, motions, all of the necessary review, coordination, public outreach. We've really tried to beef up the public outreach, and thank you to Florencia because she's done a really great job reaching out. We've had a lot of really good feedback about that. As you all know, the Novak group was engaged recently to help us develop our strategic planning framework that connects our goals that the board developed over the last several months, and developing this prioritized work plan that operationalizes our goals. I don't know if that's quite a word. And I've talked with the consultant about, she is ready, I think, to meet with the board to go over that framework. And I was putting out a couple of dates last week for you all. We talked about it at the agenda meeting today, and I'm going to send out some additional dates tomorrow, hopefully.
Just a couple of comments. I was going to bring it up under my comments, but I was very impressed with. I was impressed with this group. Certainly, when they talked about the wage and salary review, position control review, but also their experience with strategic planning for towns and cities across the country is very, very in depth. They've actually helped one municipality achieve the Baldrige Award, which is the highest recognition of quality improvement in any industry. So I'd encourage us to, I'd obviously like to hear what other board members think, but I think given the, some changes in our own staffing that support this function, and I know this, I'm talking out on both sides of my mouth, but I think this is a resource that we spend a lot of time on developing our strategic plan. I think we need to have the resources to support it. And I was very impressed with this group, and I hope we engage them to have a more, bolder participation with us going forward.
Thank you very much. Island Home, I think Rita reported out on this a little bit last week. We've had our What Will It Take to Develop a New or Renovated Facility at the Current Site meeting with an internal group. We met with our consultant, Clifton Larson Allen, for a kickoff meeting. They're gathering together a lot of what-if scenarios, and we'll be meeting with them again sometime soon. Parking demand management options, meetings with the consultant that Remain has provided us are ongoing. The survey results are back in. I honestly have not really looked at those yet, but I know some people probably
Matt asked me
have.
today, where are we at on that? We've really narrowed it down with, I've been in all those meetings, most of them with transportation planner and police chief, really, like, how's this going to work? Whether it's smart stickers to, paying for it on your phone and kiosk, looking at everything and really trying to narrow it down so this board can really make an informed decision. And so we're getting there. Every meeting's been good progression.
Yeah, maybe we'll have transportation planner come in the next few weeks to give a little update. We've got some real estate matters ongoing. The grand swap at the land bank is progressing. There is some completion that's happened. There's some land court holdups and some state approvals that are still required, but I think we're moving along on that. Same goes for the transaction with Land Bank and NISDA for the corner of Francis Street and Washington. The staffing study and the Plus Department operational review are both underway with the Novak Group. The Senior Center, I think we talked about this last week maybe, has had, Senior Center Work Group has had its first meeting, and that group's working on some criteria for a new building. They're going to be looking at some town property maps and things like that up in the upcoming weeks. We have some personnel things to report on. The budget analyst and finance position is filled, as we just mentioned with Ally. The labor relations director position continues to be vacant. The HR director and I talked today about some potential ideas to address that. The strategic projects manager, as I think you all know, has left the position on a full-time basis. We are retaining him for a period of time to close out some of the projects that he was working on, and we're working on sort of a bit of a strengthening of the structure of the strategic projects and planning function, in addition to that adding in things like a resiliency / sustainability coordinator type of position. And we're going to be coming to you with a proposal sometime probably within the next couple of months on that. The open meeting law.
Just a comment. I know this is management's prerogative, but I'm just going to say my 2 cents. I think there's some value in having a resource that is, because we all have a reluctance to add new projects onto our busy management team in whatever area. I think there's some benefit in having a position that isn't all plotted out for the next 2 years that has some capacity to absorb and slough off, if you will, projects over time. So I think that's just my input for that position.
Good, thank you. The open meeting law compliance position, we're still working to fill that. The deputy DPW director for facilities position is filled. The candidate will start at the end of November, early December. The building commissioner position in plus is currently vacant. We're working on filling that. The deputy fire chief position remains vacant. We're working to fill that. We have a procurement assistant position. This is something of a new position or a restructured position really in finance. We are finding that procurement is overtaking everybody's lives, so we're trying to get that position filled, more of an administrative type of a role. The real estate specialist, we have put out a RFP, I think, document, proposal in the paper, and we're hoping to get some responses on that.
So are you looking for an individual or a consulting firm that will,
I think either.
Okay.
We're looking for either one of those groups to apply, and I think we're putting it out to see what we'll get. Maybe there is an individual out there who could take it on, or perhaps there's a larger firm that could dedicate a staff person. 2020 capital project requests are well underway with the capital program committee, and I think we hear from the chair at your meetings about how that's going. The 2020 budget we just talked about. The marijuana dispensaries, internally, we need to develop this cost monitoring protocol in accordance with state requirements. So what we learned from town council is that towns are going to need to track what their various costs are as they relate to managing, monitoring, administering what's needed to address marijuana dispensary businesses. There may be extra police calls or extra fire calls or additional admin time, and you have to keep track of all of that and relate it back to what you are ultimately charging in the host community agreement. We also need to work out internally how the licenses are going to be monitored, if there's any license conditions, how they are going to be monitored. And then following the special town meeting, we'll probably get back to working on potential criteria or process for the board to consider regarding the recreational applications and the medicals.
One thing that kind of struck me going to FinCom and talking about the marijuana is one of our criteria, I think, should be local benefit or keep it local in a way. I think that's, in my mind, that was part of what we're doing by going slow. If we open this up to the free market and it's unlimited and we're going to end up with 4 or 5 really wealthy businesses here, and I think we may not have the chance to figure out how do we set up a co-op? How does the co-op benefit island growers and island individuals? We could end up with 4. Eventually these could be bought out. 4 entities where the money is just siphoned off island. Right now we're fortunate that the product can't go back and forth across the water. At some point that may not be the way it is, but I would hope that we support the town meeting article and then work over the next, till special town meeting or till regular town meeting or next special town meeting to figure out how do we get the cooperatives in place? How do we make sure that we're setting up something that's beneficial for the island growers and the island community rather than, just be at the whim of the free market? Because I think it's, when I read about it in other states and other communities, that has not necessarily gone great. So, we've done a lot of, the state has done a lot of smart moves with this, with the signage, and they've looked at some of the mistakes that have been made in other areas. But I think we have an opportunity to do something here. If it's going to be a business and it's going to be embraced and it's going to be an industry, let's have it be an industry based on Nantucket, benefiting people on Nantucket. Let's not have another big business that's just siphoning millions and millions of dollars to the other side of the, other side of the sound. So I think that was one of the, when I really thought about it, that was one of the real main tenets that I sort of learned from Rita talking about it. When I really thought about it, I think it would be important. So anyway.
I think that we'll have to talk more about some form of zoning regulation that allows like an individual grower that's not necessarily in the CN or CTEC or CI, sorry, CN or CI.
And this would give us time, this would give us time to do that and time to protect those individual growers so that we have a chance to do the right thing for them. I think it was kind of interesting. I talked to a potential grower today and, was sort of running this by him. And he started the conversation. He's like, nah, just let it rip. We'll be fine, blah, blah, blah. But the more we talked about it, I said, no, like the zoning changes and things like that, we really do need to, to do that. And so it's just interesting.
I hope you're right, though, because I'm worried that the limitation might force us right into these licenses going to the person with the corporation with the most money that can buy them out.
Yeah.
I'm leery of that.
Well, that can be one of our selection criteria for our second one. The first one has a community agreement that says they have to grow it on island. We can ask the second one to do the same thing, and then we could. And they've, I think Green Lady has represented that they're willing to, work with a cooperative and work with on island people, and if they test, they're willing to help test for them. So I think the second one needs to be in the same vein. And we need to not just go to town meeting and say, okay, we're done. We need to look at the next steps, like you're saying. So
I think later this month in October, we're going to put on the agenda the criteria once we know what special town meeting vote is. So I'd like to ask the board to, just what you did, Matt, start thinking about what you'd want to see in that criteria. Right. So we'll put it as much as we can in the agenda packet so we can start moving forward after STM.
At the last Finance Committee meeting, there was, at the last public hearing, there was a lot of discussion about the number of retail establishments that we approved and asked questions about why we are linking it to a percentage of the year-round liquor licenses. And the fact that it's, the argument I stated was that was the legal minimum, and to take Matt's position that we really wanted the time to do all these things. So it's always easier to expand than to limit. There were a lot of questions about that, really about, well, this is the way the community voted. But what was hard is it's, what else do you, it's either a low limit or, is 4 a good number? Is 5? Is 10? So I tried to say that was the only reference that we had that, that we would be allowed to link it to. That's a difficult thing to communicate, though.
We can always expand it with a vote of town meeting.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, and this isn't, at least I don't think anybody else's, this isn't an attempt to restrict access. It's really an attempt to go slow and make sure that we do the right thing. So, but we'll find out on the 9th.
And I do think as well that, again, to your point, it really was the only reference. That 20% was the only way to come up with any number at this point without knowing what the right number could be. But I really do see it as simply giving voters more options and letting it be decided at town meeting. And again, I agree with both Don and Matt. I'm not entirely sure that how we can limit it to, or not limit it, but how we can give locals as much preference as possible. And I think Katie will be able to help us. Katie Loughlin will be able to help us with that, but we may not be able to. But I tend to think that at least starting slow, we can at least have the best chance at that.
Thank you.
Harbor Place is another project. It's been a bit slow lately. We had been having a transportation center study work group that was pretty active a number of months ago, and they haven't been so active lately pending some additional discussion with the owners group, which is being handled by our negotiating team. Two of you are on that team, along with the chairman of the FinCom and a couple of others. We're going to be meeting with the owners group again sometime in the next month or so to continue to review potential terms for the development. And we've also, as you know, contracted out with Weston and Sampson to do an infrastructure review as to what the cost impact would be for the town to make improvements to its infrastructure as a result of the development. The Coastal Resiliency Plan is underway. We have received a state grant called the MVP grant to assist with the public process. That planning process is underway. We're having internal discussions about integrating the dredge plan and the hazard mitigation plan with the Coastal Resiliency Plan. And as I mentioned earlier, that we're having internal discussions about filling the strategic projects manager position and how to structure that to get at some of these things.
Libby, can I just ask, what is Malone McBroom's timeline for coming back to us with a rough plan?
I need to check with actually Chuck on that because he was working on it. So I will get back to you on that.
And the MVP, when they say public process, is that public outreach?
It's public outreach, but it's also getting the public together to get their input into what they think the plan should contain. And we had the workshops over the spring and summer, which are part of that public process. So more things like that. Upcoming, just some general items. We do have also an internal landfill group. DPW director and I recently talked about a meeting with that group with our consultant, and the consultant is in the process of getting some information together from DEP because we think that they're probably going to, we will invite them here for a tour of the landfill and then a discussion of some pertinent issues going forward. One of the main topics being mining, continuing the mining program versus the cap and close that we are actually under an administrative consent order to do, but which has been delayed pending the continuation of the mining program. So we're going to be talking about that. The Parks Master Plan, I had a meeting today with the consultants that are handling that for us, and we had a lot of discussion about stakeholder meetings. They were here over the last couple of days reviewing all of our parks and recreational sites and facilities, and they're going to be assessing and evaluating them. We talked about the different stakeholders to contact. We talked about a public informational session sometime in November, and that seems to be moving along pretty well. It's about to get very public with public input and feedback and things. 2019 annual town meeting prep we'll get into in the next agenda item. We're working internally with the housing specialist to develop an employee housing policy, which we hope to present to you all sometime in the next few months. And I've mentioned it off and on now, our regulations codification project. We've hired the firm that does the town code, general code publishers, to put all of our regulations into a town code-like book and system that would be online. We've gotten to the step where all of our known regulations have been put into that format by general code. They've been reviewed by all of the departments. There were a few legal issues here and there that came up, which I think have pretty well been resolved. The next step is that general code is incorporating all of the changes that came out of that process into a more of a final draft document. And then I'll be talking to them about the best way to get the final product adopted. Since it involves multiple boards, you all, Planning Board, Board of Health, Concom, boards like that, I've talked to Town Council a little bit about this. We may have one giant joint public hearing to re-adopt them all. There won't be any substantive changes. There will be a lot of formatting changes. And then going forward, there will be a specific process, just like there is with bylaw amendments, to amend regulations so that everybody's on the same page with it and the amendments are consistent and known. And that's it for Town Manager's report.
Thank you, Libby. That's a lot. Now on the select board reports and comments. Preliminary discussion regarding 2019 annual town meeting warrant articles.
So, Mr. Chairman, there's a sheet in your packet. I usually prepare some kind of a sheet like this. It's a bit early to be doing this, but we thought it might not be a bad time to start thinking about the 2019 annual town meeting. This is nowhere near final, just preliminary. This first bunch of articles are all the annual articles. You may have noticed that there's a bit of a new item number 23 under annual articles, ride share money. This is new. All cities and towns in the state are getting what's called ride share money. It's a portion of it's some kind of a tax on Ubers and other ride share programs. There's this very specific allocation to all the cities and towns, and because it's so new, they sent out some guidance earlier in the summer that said you could just appropriate the funds and use them. They subsequently sent out another bit of guidance that said you can't appropriate those funds without a town meeting vote. Our share is very minimal, something like $23,000. But nonetheless, we're going to have to appropriate it at a town meeting for something to do with the impact of rideshare services on the island.
Any idea how they calculate that? Do you even know?
There is a calculation. There's a guidance document that I don't have totally handy, but I can send it out again.
Of population.
Yeah, there's a number of criteria, I think. Okay, now we're getting into selectmen-sponsored articles, and I keep a file of, what we might think about for the next town meeting. I put stuff in it as we proceed throughout the year. There may be other appropriation or finance-related articles other than the ones that are in the annual section, the Affordable Housing Trust appropriation being one. Zoning, bylaw, and general bylaw amendments. I noted here that I didn't have a list from planning yet. I believe I now have that list. It's in my email. I haven't pulled it out yet, but I will be forwarding that around shortly. And I just noted that last year the board had a discussion in January about zoning articles and how you more wanted them presented, Matt. I think this might have generated from something that you put forward. So I will, if the board is so desiring, I'll put that forward to the planning staff.
Yeah, I think it's good practice. I think that we should understand what the implications are, and that should happen early in the process. And then that should help inform the finance committee. I mean, it shouldn't be us having to guess what's the impact really going to be. It should actually be quantified and detailed. So
I agree. Thank you for putting that on there. I agree.
So more on that later. General bylaws, again, these are just things that have come up over the year. Add the Loran Barracks property to the Sconset Sewer District in conjunction with the sewer director. We're right now there is a septic system that serves the Loran Barracks, and we're discussing extending sewer to it. And it seems like we're going to be able to do that. However, the property has to be put into the Sconset Sewer District. Signs have come up recently in a number of ways. So I have had some discussion with town council and other staff about how to more clearly deal with them. It's a bit unclear as to who enforces what exactly. And we have some ideas about how that could be a bit clearer. So that may or may not require a bylaw. It might be able to be some kind of a regulation.
There should be some limitation on where the placement and length of time
Yes, we are not.
and probably something
Well, we're not allowed
about
to regulate content.
nothing inappropriate, obviously.
That gets tricky, but there may be some ways to standardize some of that. There may be some various amendments in connection with some of the legal issues that arose as a result of the regulations project. The general code people were very detailed and thorough in reviewing the regulations, and they also reviewed our bylaws in conjunction with the regulations, and they pointed out a number of inconsistencies, not a lot, a few minor ones, that they said you either need to change your bylaw or change your regulations. So I have a little bit of a list of those. The non-voting taxpayer advisory committee is requesting a change to the quorum requirement to be a lesser number. The Affordable Housing Trust, I have some emails about this. There was some talk earlier in the year about incorporating the $100,000 spending limit, which I think is just a board policy at the moment, into something more formal. I don't know if people want to do that or not. I just had it in my file as a discussion point.
We talked about it, 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe changing the language or so it's not as, so it's communicated easily to everyone. We had a little bit of a confusion.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
And maybe that's an opportunity to fix it.
Clear it up, yep.
I
So-
thought that it was more to do with them being able to move forward with putting a deposit on a property to
Yes.
hold it.
Exactly. And that what the trust was requesting was actually already allowed.
Right. I'm not sure that we need a change, but
Yeah, I think a clarification.
But maybe at the very least, you should have a written policy. I don't know. I'm not really sure what people wanted to get clearer, but
Yeah, that's something that we can discuss at the Affordable Housing Trust as well as to where the confusion came up and then see if that's suited to more formal clarification or if it's something that we can do with a written policy.
potentially rescind the historical commission. This is a bylaw commission, and what we are finding is that they have not achieved a quorum in well over a year, perhaps more like 2 years. They're very difficult to get a hold of, and because they're a bylaw group, which are actually statutory in nature, sometimes we need a recommendation from them, and it's been virtually impossible to get. So maybe we don't need them anymore. They can't meet.
Just a quick comment. I think that part of the reason that we're having trouble with them is that, and part of the trouble we're having with signs is that we don't have sort of the strong HDC that we had previously. I think the fact that we've rolled it into another department and there isn't staff and people dedicated the way they were, and John Hedden's doing a great job, but he can't do it alone. Instead of having 2 or 3 people on it, and the island's twice as busy as it used to be, we're splitting it. I think that's why we're having trouble with some of these myself. And maybe the Novak group, when their analysis might detail that to us, and maybe there's a better way to set up and do that. So.
But the Historical Commission, there's some history there going back
There is.
long before Plus was integrated. So I'm not sure their mandate is that clear. So personally,
I've had a couple of people ask me about speed limits on electric bikes on bike paths. It may be something to look at. I don't know how big of a problem it is or isn't, but some people have
There
mentioned
might be
it.
things that we could do. We might have to have some meetings about this, whether it's
Maybe BPAC could give a recommendation.
we could, but there might be something like there's 3 classes of electric bikes. We could say there could be a regulation, or we only sell class 1 because class 3 you can go 28 miles an hour. So you might be able to regulate it in more of a creative way like that.
Even
Or rentals. Or,
Yep. Even non-electric bikes has been commented to me. Perhaps there needs to be a limit on regular bikes.
How do we enforce that?
I don't know.
We wouldn't be able to.
Is there a clear differentiation between an electric bike and a hoverboard or an electric skateboard in terms of its ability, where they're allowed to go?
Go ahead.
They have a motor?
I was going to say, I think our traffic regulations already state that only non-motorized vehicles are allowed on bike paths.
Yeah, so that's why I was thinking, why is an electric bike considered differently?
It's not a motor. It doesn't have a.
The state law says it is a motorized vehicle.
There's a battery.
Electric bikes.
Yeah.
Okay.
State says it is. So technically, electric bikes aren't allowed on the bike paths. But how do you know? Well, sometimes they're not easy to tell. Right. So that'll be an interesting conversation, I think. Figure out how to.
just get your people right on that. So.
It's a job for BPAC.
We have, as you know, a special act pending to change the name of the board from Board of Selectmen to Select Board. And once that has been enacted, we would probably want to consider changing all of the references in the town code to Select Board, which we cannot do until the legislation is passed. Home rule petitions, the ones listed here are the ones that have not been acted upon by the legislature as of right now. The charter change that I just mentioned, the Wannacomet Sconset Water merger, that was discussed today evidently by the Wannacomet and Sconset Water Commissions, and they agreed to support the continuation of the legislation. Rescinding the Nantucket Mosquito Control Act, the Community Housing Bank, and these other things just have not passed yet. And I am not sure if there's anything new that we want to look at.
Mr. Chairman. When Dylan and Julian were here, we had a conversation, as you all know, about home rule petitions, and I thought we had an opening with them to really engage them in a conversation about, rather than just renewing these, making sure that they were, especially on the Community Housing Bank, they may have some other alternatives that they think may be more feasible. So I think that's worth doing, personally.
I think we had talked a bit about putting something forth if the short-term rental tax passes, that the funding would be specifically slated towards affordable housing. And there was some discussion about infrastructure that goes along with housing, like road improvements and sewers. Right?
I'm trying to think of if that requires a home rule petition.
I don't know that it's a home rule petition, but it was something we had to take to town meeting to earmark the funds.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes, it is. And that's sort of iffy right now because
The wrong section.
It hasn't passed.
There seems to be a lot of confidence that it will, if it doesn't pass now, it will pass within the next year.
Early in the year, maybe.
Okay, I'll jot that down as a potential. Mass General Law acceptances. There's a municipal water infrastructure investment fund, and what it does is it's sort of like the CPA surcharge. You can charge up to 3% for a variety of water and wastewater infrastructure needs. The town of Sandwich recently was seeking to enact it, and one of the things they did, I don't think we necessarily want to do this, but in order to make it palatable to their taxpayers, they reduced the CPA by about half, and they were going to implement this tax by 1.5%, and then use the proceeds for this sort of thing. It does require a ballot vote in addition to a town meeting vote, and I haven't really gotten into it in a lot of detail. I was going to try to meet with the town manager of Sandwich and go over how they were working it. So it's just something to put in the back of your mind. We may not be ready for it for the upcoming town meeting. Real estate related, there may be the additional conveyance of town land in connection with the grand swap with the land bank for one of the transfers that's involved. That I am advised by the director of planning. I'll get you the details on that. And with regard to the Nantucket Harbor Shimo Plus sewer extension project, we apparently have a need to take some additional easements in connection with that project, which actually I think at the very beginning of this project we thought we might need to do at some point. Other items.
There's what I was talking about.
Yeah, that is probably what you're talking about. I'll make that a little bit more explanatory. The short-term rental tax legislation. The Government Study Committee, I'm not sure whether or not they will have specific recommendations for town meeting. Ballot questions, we probably will have a debt exclusion or two, or a capital exclusion or two for very specific projects. We mentioned earlier that the citizen article deadline is Monday, November 19th, and going forward, we'll be trying to focus on some of this a little more and be working towards putting together a draft warrant for you. And meeting with FinCom has some meetings coming up in November, December on citizen, I guess it's more December, on citizen articles.
Question. What's the status on the design work that was being done for the DPW facility?
The DPW director and I are going through the RFP that we're going to have to put out for OPM services, which is the first step, and then concurrently with that, we're also going to begin the process of reviewing the RFP to be putting out for design services. So once we hire the OPM and engage the OPM, they'll be able to review that and be able to get it out so we can start as quickly as possible.
So is this something that we think would be even a potential for the annual? Probably
No,
not.
actually, during the Capcom process, the DPW directors indicated that it's going to be more than likely 21 when that would be put out
Okay.
and ready to go.
Thanks.
Did anything jump out at you as something to not work on or work on? Okay.
I was just flipping through the timeline, and I saw just January 2nd, we have a board meeting. That's going to be just put that on everybody's radar.
Yeah,
It's a
so
weird
actually,
date.
I have, I forgot to mention it today at the agenda meeting. That is a date I wanted to talk over with you, because that may be, in fact, I didn't even talk to Erica about this. She'll probably kill me, but that is a fifth Wednesday month. So what we may need to do is not meet the 2nd, because it's going to be kind of hard to get
Yeah,
a
meet
lot
the
of
next
things
four,
together,
right,
but
right.
meet the fifth Wednesday.
That would be great.
I think we should do that. We should.
Okay.
You have full direction. Forward. You have a problem with that, Matt? Doing the next 4? Yeah, that makes sense. The only thing I saw, October 17th, we review the department town warrant articles. That fast?
Actually, I didn't update this since
Oh, okay.
July, and we really kind of did that tonight.
Okay.
If I have anything new and different and urgent that I want to get to you, I can bring it forward in the next couple of weeks. I haven't even put it out to the departments yet, if they have
Okay.
anything in particular. So there may be a
That's
few
what I
other
was thinking.
things.
Like in 2 weeks,
Yeah.
there's going to have department
No.
articles. Okay.
And then I guess, and I'm not looking, I haven't looked at that this closely yet, but I think just moving our timeline up so that there's more time and we aren't squeezing everything into the last month or last 2 weeks. I mean, hopefully we've been able to do that a little bit.
This reflects the most moving up we can probably do.
Okay.
And actually, tonight is part of that.
Right.
Right.
But, what about planning board? I know we had seems like the last couple of years, we had limited ability to review motions or articles because of kind of additional public hearings they had. So we given them our annual, please be timely and
I believe they are aware of it with the submission of their list this week,
okay.
which I will get out to you all. But they will be reminded about it. I
Okay.
think they're pretty well aware of it.
Okay, thank you.
I think, yeah, they're listed here as January and February, and that would be a fair amount earlier, I think. If they actually happen in January, it would be great.
Anything else there from the board or Libby?
No.
Okay, any committee reports? Nothing? Nada?
Oh, I don't know if it's a committee report, but,
Comments?
well, no, first comment is happy to see the wording about pools in the earlier thing we talked about tonight. That was, you're saying best practices, and the land council will follow that. I think that's a step in the right direction. I'm reading something about pools that was given me by Rita, who can, I can talk about phosphorus and some other things now, but she could talk about it a lot more. My wife goes on Facebook, and she sometimes shows me, hey, Matt, have you seen this? And so she showed me a thread with 30 or 40 people talking about bike paths started by a Robert Hall. And it's very interesting because what he's talking about is similar to what we talked about ourselves, similar to a conversation we're having at BPAC. And it's, how the bikes have the stop signs, but they don't stop. And then the cars don't have any stop signs and they don't stop. And how do we set up a system where, the people understand what is the travel way and who has the right of way and how to bike safely. And I think, And it's interesting, when you even see a Facebook thread, there's well, the bikes have to stop every time and the cars can drive through. There's people who have that complete attitude. And then there's people more like me who say the bikes should have to stop the 3 or 4 times like they're dangerous, like Tom Nevers Road or Dionis Road or, Sconset. They should stop at those, but I think the rest of them are nuisance, and that's signs. I counted them one time when I rode the loop, and there were like 50-something stop signs. So your hour bike ride turns into an hour and a half bike ride. If you actually just came to a full stop and looked both way, got going again, you're not exercising anymore. And so I think that, and then we've had, at BPAC, we've had, what's his name, came up with the, Ian, yes, there you go. Ian came up and he showed us some bike paths, pictures of them in Colorado. And they were the way I think the bike paths should be. They had stop signs for the vehicles that are crossing that traveled way on any crossing, any driveway, any road, minor road that crossed, and the bikes had the stop signs at the major roads. And so we're talking about, can we look to see is that legal? How do we make that legal? Because if we want to encourage people to ride bikes and to use that transportation mode, and for it to be safe, we need to be thinking about those things. And I think it's very interesting that was, an earlier kind of conversation tonight when I had written it down as one of the things I wanted to talk about, because, our 2 sunniest months when we want people on bikes are when we're the busiest. We need to sort of change the mindset. So people are thinking, okay, I'm in a 5,000-pound vehicle. I'm in a 10,000-pound vehicle. I'm the one that has to look out for the other people. I'm the one that's going to do the most damage. That has to be the mindset when someone's behind the wheel of a car. And I think, anyway.
The Conservation Commission held a public hearing on the SPBF application last night, for a couple of hours. The applicants submitted and reviewed in some detail their engineering plans. There's a lot of complexity to the project, obviously. There's a new engineer who did not participate in the original emergency project, and he's making some recommendation for some changes that will also add to the complexity as they look at the extension of it. The Land Council has hired a consulting engineer who has done, I'm not sure if the correct term is a peer review, but has reviewed the application and presented his findings yesterday. And I was looking, I'm sure it's going to be posted, but that would be an interesting read. And for those of you who are interested in going, the agendas will have specific topics, so they can really focus their conversation on specific areas as they review this. And the applicant approved an extension at the request of the Concom. Thank you.
If there's nothing else, motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.